Today on Won't You Be My Gamer, we are joined by the world's greatest living medieval pig expert, Jamie Kreider.
An honor and a privilege.
I swear, we're laughing, but I'm so glad you're here, Jamie.
This is going to be exciting.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we're also talking about life in the early Middle Ages. Nicole, what are we playing?
We are playing Medieval Dynasty. Ooh. We will be chopping down trees, punching wolves, and creating a legend.
We're already sitting next to one.
Yes, a living legend.
Yep.
What exactly is the time period of the early Middle Ages?
Early Middle Ages are like 500 to 1,000, and then high and late Middle Ages are like 1,000 to 1,500.
Okay, so this period of like 500 to 1,000 ACE, like, did it? That's also the Dark Ages, right? Or what we would call the Dark Ages.
Yeah, I think that got its name because there wasn't as much documentation as from later periods. There they are.
They're the pigs.
You guys, these do not look like medieval pigs.
Okay, but why not?
They're too pink. They don't have enough hair. They're too fat. Their legs are too stubby. Pigs in the Middle Ages were like long and lean and had like bristly fur. And they were sort of, because most of them were free-ranging, I mean, they were like interbreeding with wild pigs often, even though that wasn't the intention. Yeah, these guys are like, they look like stall-fed luxury pigs.
Luxury pigs. That's what I want to be.
Yeah, I mean, these pigs look like they're living a good life. Did pigs live this good of a life?
I mean,
why am I being so mean to them?
yeah, you're...
I'm not doing anything but
kicking
walking.
the piglets around.
And they're fine with it. Everyone's just like, hey, we're sleeping.
Archaeologists have found very few, like, particular pigsties, because they, you know, most buildings in the Middle Ages are just made of timber, so it doesn't leave a lot of evidence. But, yeah, people kept them inside sometimes, but most of the time they were, like, out and around, either wandering in fenced areas or, like, in the woods.
Does this village, like, strike you as in the realm of accurate?
Yeah, I mean, there's, like, wattle and daub walls, and mostly it's timber. I mean, this is, like, a pretty nice, for the early Middle Ages, this would have been, like, a pretty nice, well-off settlement.
And people lived in these small settlements like this?
Yeah, you might only have, like, you know, 10 or 15 households, and there would be, like, shared areas for doing farm work and, like, manufacturing artisanal stuff, and then, like, farms would be kind of around all of it.
Those farms, were they owned by the people that worked them, or were they owned by, like, the kingdom?
It was a mix. Some people, like, owned the land they worked on. Sometimes they were tenant farmers, like renters. Sometimes they had to work their landlord's lands.
Why pigs? Like,
Why
of
now?
all the animals.
I mean, hey, even if these pigs don't look medieval, you've got to give the game props for including them, because pigs were super important in the Middle Ages. Everyone raised them.
Is that why you, like, kind of zeroed in on pigs? You were like, they're very important and people don't think they're as important as they should be.
Yeah, and they, like, kept showing up in the documentary record in all these unexpected ways. Part of the issue is that they're very smart animals. They're escape artists. They're very social. So they actually cause a lot of problems for people raising them. Like, they escape all the time. They root around to do damage to crops. They can even attack small children. They chew up corpses.
Jeez.
It's like
Right.
a whole
I've always
whole
heard
thing.
that as like if you want to get rid of a body.
Take it to a pig.
Yeah, they did
Is
that
that
on
true?
Deadwood. Yeah.
Which is old-timey.
Yeah, 19th century
The
corpse
pig leaves
disposal.
nothing.
I mean, you obviously weren't supposed to do that in the Middle Ages, but they would, like, you know, because they love rooting, they would dig up buried bodies.
I was going to ask because, like, I know you mentioned that pigs were smart, and I feel like now we have an understanding of how smart pigs really are. Did people back then really understand
Yeah.
just how much they were capable of?
Was there a negative connotation to the pig back then?
They had negative connotations, but it was a mixed bag. Like, they also had really positive connotations. I think more people back then knew pigs were smart than we do now, because everybody would have, like, been around them and worked with them, and they definitely were aware of all of the things they were capable of doing. They really respected how pigs were really flexible eaters. Like, a pig will eat not just corpses, but almost anything. And a lot of that stuff people themselves didn't want to eat, like grubs or acorns. And they were really impressed that pigs could, like, adapt to all of these microecologies and then turn all of that stuff into pork, which people really did love.
So were they skinny pink pigs? Were they fat, like gray pigs? Were they more like what we would consider like hogs?
Like a warthog?
Yeah, they often had like a sort of bristle along the back. They're often represented as having like tusks that come out. Their coats seem to have been different colors, most often brown or reddish probably, but in later manuscript paintings, there's like polka dotted ones, there's like black buttons with white stripes around their bellies. That stuff is, we can't know from their bones, but we can at least glean from pictures.
Do we have much medieval art, like portraying the pig?
Yeah, weirdly we do, because one popular book form in the late Middle Ages was prayer books, like books of hours, and at the beginning of those you'll see like the agricultural cycle of the year depicted in like monthly calendar images, and every November there's pigs getting fattened on the acorn crop, and every December pigs are getting slaughtered because that was the time you kill them. So there's pigs there. And then also all these different moments in the Bible mention pigs. And so if you have like an illustrated Psalter or something, sometimes pigs come up there too.
No, we were talking about how pretty pigs are. But what about the other types of medieval paintings, the way that they depict animals?
Because it's hilarious when you see like a horse.
Yeah, or the medieval cats.
Yeah.
And they have like these just a smiling little face, but like the creepy little eyes and like what?
Yeah, my sibling has sent me a lot of those.
Did cats look different, or was like the lens at the artistic lens at the time just so different than ours?
Osteoarchaeologists, people who work on old bones, like I think based on cat skeletons, they did not have human-looking faces. They mostly look like cats now.
But someone looked into it.
I think part of it is like we just have different iconographies, like habits of representing animals. Like when you think about the ways like our pigs and cats look, it's very stylized. It's just sort of we all get in the habit of saying these cues like make us think this animal. Medieval illuminators also goofed around some, and some of those cat faces are definitely
They're memes.
They're memes.
Yeah, maybe they were like,
Medieval
eventually these will reach a wide audience.
Yeah.
Speaking of reaching a wide audience, like obviously they couldn't travel by plane or train. Or, they're confined to where they were born to an extent. So how different was the life of a regular person in Europe versus the Near East, the Middle East, the Far East?
Some people traveled a lot, actually, so there are surprising contacts between like the Middle East and around the Mediterranean and Europe. Most of people would have stayed pretty local, either through word of mouth or through texts or just like talking to people who did travel. You would often learn quite a bit about other areas. Plane travel has changed the way we like engage with other cultures, because you're like dropped from one city, say Los Angeles, to Beijing, and you're just like in this world all of a sudden that's totally different. But since you had to travel either on foot or by wagon or something, you would have had more time to adjust to the changes in cultures and languages as you went along. So by the time you say start in Germany and end up in say Spain, you're way more adjusted to what has shifted, and you can even understand, like, say the Latin language changes a lot regionally, but you could actually get it because you've had all of these weeks of preparation.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's neat.
That's actually one of the questions I have on our little truth or myth board over here. Is it a misconception that people didn't travel? And it sounds like you're saying they did, in fact.
Yeah, and one of the ways we know that they traveled, I mean, besides writing about it in text, is archaeologists have found all this cool stuff, either in people's trash or just accidentally discarded, that comes from all over the place.
Can you tell us a bit about how the rise of Christianity played in, did it like unite these different parts of Europe?
Was it like unite or die?
Yeah.
I mean, there were definitely people who were really zealous and proactive about trying to convert people to Christianity. A lot of it happened through influences that were not top-down, like if often women in their families were the first to convert, and they would teach their children the religion, and or they'd persuade their husbands to convert, or like a bunch of elites would decide this was like in their best interests to become Christian. Or you might have like a local wonder worker or saint where you were like, this is very impressive, I'm more interested in Christianity now. So there was all of these different ways that over time people converted.
Well, look at this guy. Look at this lovely looking ram, and
Ew. It's a sheep.
do they look accurate?
Yeah, it's funny though, the horns on this one reminds me of how there were certain four-horned sheep. They were treated as like kind of exotica in the Middle Ages, where there seems to be a few areas where the genetic mutation happened more frequently, and they'd export them to other places as like like
They're-
cool zoo animals.
They're
almost.
extinct now.
Like, I think there's still like natural occurrences of this phenomenon.
You mentioned women playing a role in kind of like influencing the household in terms of religion.
Yeah.
What other kind of role did they play in their communities or in their family structure?
I mean, they were like a crucial part of the labor economy in their households, both in farming and also in manufacturing. Like women were central to textile production in this period. So basically, like any clothes or fabrics, they're likely the ones to have made it.
Is that what's happening here right now?
Is she weaving?
I'm flirting is what's happening.
Oh, okay. She's married.
She's
Nicole.
like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I have so much work.
But
to
she's
do."
working on something. Could you tell me something about your skills? That's what. That's
Yeah,
exactly what we're
Well,
talking
tires
about.
me, yeah.
So she's doing field work.
Could you move a little?
Okay.
That's for
all
some
right.
reason I can ask everyone that, and it's like I can just.
Yeah,
walk
it is
around
not
you.
at all clear what she's working on.
And that guy,
What is he
doing
contributing?
nothing. Oh my gosh, this is too real.
But,
he's
I mean,
24.
yeah,
His
he's-
name is Cuthbert, and he's
Cuthbert.
24.
You guys, there are so many great names from
I
the Middle
bet.
Ages. Like
Yeah.
all of these charters where it like lists people involved in a legal transaction. There's just
What are the good
like
ones?
I read a document recently where there was a Freddo, there was a Rotini. I think that was a
Rotini.
woman's name.
Both of
A
these sound like pastas.
Cosbert.
Mm.
Yeah,
have
it's
the
a lot of
Cosbert.
fun.
You really have to find a wife in this. It's sort of similar to the game we played, Sid Meier's Pirates, where like sure you have to be a pirate, but kind of the subplot, you gotta talk to the ladies.
Was that a big expectation of you're going to get married,
Gotta
have
have a
children,
wife,
maybe
gotta
you'll
have
go to the
kids.
next village over?
Yeah, I mean, definitely parents wanted their kids to get married. Like, just keeping the family going was like a thing. I mean, you see it especially people who became monks. There's stories about how their families are really pressuring them to get married beforehand, and they like really felt it. And sometimes they like waited until they'd actually gotten married to say, "Oh, actually, I wanted to be a monk," and then they'd have to convince their partner to also be up for that.
How would that work?
They didn't annul it. They basically needed them to agree to also become a monk.
Okay, so one of the truth or myth we have listed here, women didn't have options.
Oh yeah, no, they had options.
They
I
had-
mean,
okay.
not as many as now.
And not
but
as many as men, I imagine.
honestly, though, if you think about like most people living in rural communities, like 85 to 90% of the population, like most people are probably just going to do the things they grew up into, which is like farming and craft work.
Say you lived in a small village or rural community and you did want to seek out some kind of higher education or learning. Was that an option to you regardless of gender?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good example of how men did have a little bit better options. They could like learn from a local bishop, or they could go to a monastery. You could send your daughters to monasteries too. It didn't happen as often. But you didn't necessarily have to then like stay a member of the clergy if you did that stuff.
Tell us about some of the hunting that would happen, because they hunted pigs as well, right? They didn't just keep them as domestic
Yeah.
livestock. They hunted.
Wild boar were like a big animal that if you were like a macho elite person, you would definitely like have as a pastime that you love to do with your hunting buddies. They're ferocious, they're large, they're fast, they're clever, and so it was like a big deal to like go through the hunt and successfully kill one. That was like some people treat it as training for war, actually.
On these boar hunts, was there ever a time where somebody got Robert Baratheon, like a king or a noble person died during one of these hunts?
People did die during hunts. Sometimes it seems like they might have been killed by their own men during hunts, but it was like passed off as a hunting accident. There was one French king who was killed by a pig, not on a hunt, but he was riding his horse through town and a pig ran out in front of the horse, like a crazy traffic accident, and tripped the horse, and then the king fell and then like later died from his wounds from the accident.
Oh, Nail du cochon, I believe was we call that. I don't know. I think cochon is pig.
Yeah,
Is
well,
it?
and the chronicler who told us the story called it a porcus diabolicus, like demonic pig.
Porcus?
That's beautiful.
My God, if I was making like a new like
Gamer
Xbox gamer tag right now, it would be Porcus Diabolicus.
I know.
I like how we both
100%.
They're for the
that.
taking.
And we're
yeah.
like, gamer tag.
Yeah, we better see somebody in the chat next time we're streaming that's Porcus Diabolicus. Please. Did people in medieval times really smell as bad as we assume they did? Did they not have personal hygiene?
They would have smelled different than us, but as with like any smell, like kind of like the smell of your own house, you'd have gotten used to it after a while.
To me, that reads like, yes, they smell bad.
Well, I mean, you don't see people complaining about it. They would have taken fewer baths than us, but I mean, once a week wouldn't have been totally weird. Again, like monks are kind of a useful example here because they thought you shouldn't bathe that much because you shouldn't be vain. But they thought once a week was maybe medically advisable.
Okay. And what are they kind of cleaning themselves with? Because they don't have like Dove soap.
You can make soap out of
Doves.
animal products.
Okay.
And I mean, people still do, like goat's milk. People also would have used scents too if they were wealthier, like various kinds of spices. There was like a really healthy spice import trade from South and Southeast Asia.
Okay, so I think we can say that is a myth. They were cleaner than we give them credit for. You don't just talk about pigs as an animal or as livestock. You talk about pigs kind of like as a way of life, pigs as an idea. They teach us so much more about things like agriculture, the economy, philosophy. What is kind of your stance on all of that and the pig as more?
They started thinking about how all of these different parts of their environments were interconnected, like the ways that pigs could adapt to a particular environmental niche, or if there was like an acorn shortage that year, what that meant for other parts of an ecosystem. So they really started trying to develop practices and policies that accommodated that kind of ecological flux and interdependency. I think also in seeing pigs as malleable, they would see how something had kind of two sides to it, like the paradox of the pig being both unruly and difficult and also quasi-sacrificial. So it, they had like a pretty sophisticated understanding of what things meant when you could see how smart they were.
You and your research and historians regard pigs with this reverence, but like in the medieval cultural imagination, did they think of them with this kind of
I think they had more
appreciation?
respect for their animals than we do,
Okay.
because they were around them a lot. Like, we're not around our food really much at all before we eat it. Pigs were ubiquitous in the way both like dogs are now and grocery stores. So imagine both like an animal you're like very familiar with, but also something that's like crucial to your diet. It's like a strange combination when you think about it.
Many people spend 40 hours a week working for their employer and the rest of the week doing their own thing. How does this compare to how much people had to work in the Middle Ages?
Technically, there were weekends, like you weren't supposed to work on Sundays, but there was clearly a lot of arguments about this because there's all these like miracle stories of saints punishing people who kept working on Sundays. So farmers clearly were like, we need to get stuff done, like stop making us take Sundays off.
Yeah.
People were also like doing less at night than we do. Like all of our artificial lighting, I mean, they had oil lamps and stuff back then, but like really the nights were not for like continuing to be productive the way we just like keep working and working after sunset.
I imagine that also meant people woke up at dawn, ready to go, rather
Yeah.
than sleeping in to as late as I would like to.
Usually. And also their work changed a lot more throughout the year than ours does. You'd be planting in one season, harvesting in another. In the winter, you'd be working on probably more artisanal craft work and stuff.
Are there still, medieval farming practices and techniques that are employed today or have influenced contemporary techniques, if you know?
Well, one thing that's like pretty famous that was invented in the Middle Ages was something called three-course rotation or crop rotation, where like you plant 2 out of 3 years to ensure fertility of the soil rather than every other year. And so they didn't know the science of nitrogen fixing like we know now, but they definitely were attentive to the way that like land could yield more if you did certain things to it.
So this looks terrifying.
Yeah, it's dark now, and things are a-changing, but I've got a good quest right now, and it's chop down trees.
I mean, I don't know if this would have been normal activity to be out with your
Not
torch
night
and
chopping,
your,
no.
Yeah, night chopping.
Chopping.
Doesn't seem that way. I don't have that on my truth or
Working on my
myth
night chopping.
list, but
There were also a lot of like laws pertaining to what you could do in woods. Like woods are kind of special spaces where like even if someone owned a woodland, like people had different rights to the woods anyway. So like someone might own the property, but you could like cut down certain trees, or you could like mark a tree, and if no one complained about it after a certain amount of time, you could take it down. You could harvest firewood. You could get berries, nuts, that kind of thing. So
It was finders keepers.
yeah, but there were all these laws too about like don't cut down a tree and accidentally kill someone with it. Like you need to be a careful user of these woods.
Speaking of accidentally killing someone, average life expectancy, 30 years old, were people actually only living that long?
I actually am not an expert on this, but it is true that the life expectancy is averaged out and the like high infant mortality rate offsets it. So people who did live into adulthood would live usually longer than 30. And some people lived even into their 90s. That was unusual, but it happened.
There's a question I've been waiting to ask, but I want to ask it more than anything. There are a handful of instances throughout history of animals being put on trial, like a crop was pulled over or eaten, and a pig was put into clothes and then
The
put-
Airbud rule.
put to stand trial. Well, yeah, I do believe now that they refer to it as Airbud law, but you know, it seems ridiculous, but they would do that. Are you familiar with these kind of animal trials?
Yeah, they happen in the late Middle Ages.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
Do you agree with them that we should have been holding these animals accountable?
Am I pro or against
Animal trials?
Probably against. Yeah, I would say.
Okay.
But I mean, people at the time were too. There were a lot of critics who were like, "What you're trying to do is not the right way to solve this." I mean, they knew animals were smart and could be culpable for certain things, but they also didn't treat animals as like actually rational animals, and so
You're scapegoating them in a sense.
partly
Yeah.
scapegoating, partly as a way of being like, look at our collective frustration that this thing that no one in particular can be blamed for, like, went really wrong.
Well, I'm glad we are both on the right side of history
Yeah.
with this. And
We can
Nicole,
go down on the record.
Put them in, lock them up. I just keep stealing to see if there's consequences.
Any?
Thief! Thief!
Oh.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. This has been so much fun. We have copies of your books here too. Would you like to tell everyone what they are and how they can find them?
Yeah, Legions of Pigs in the early medieval West is all you want to know about pigs in the early Middle Ages. Wandering Mine is about how monks tried to deal with distraction through all sorts of strategies. And How to Focus is a translation of one monk's very interesting guide to how to concentrate in the 5th century.
I need all of these books, and I love the cover art for this. It's so
Oh, it's
good.
so good. They did a great job.
It's so good. Well, thank you. Go check out Jamie's books. And thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed to the new channel, youtube.com/@won'tyoubemygamer, and continues to support us. Nicole, how can they do so?
It's so easy. Just wander over to pbssocal.org/gamer and make a donation. Any amount makes a huge difference, and we're so appreciative of anything you can contribute. We love doing this, so we really appreciate it.
And maybe if you keep helping us, contributing, Jamie will come back with more pig facts.
Yep.
New segment on the channel.
Pig facts.
Yeah, I think Nicole and I have the power to greenlight a show. For
A
you.
spin-off, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Confirmed. Yeah, I just heard from upstairs.
Great.
Confirmed.
We're on it.
We're on the top 4.